Oh, transgender athlete debate.
Transgender athlete debate.
Transgender athlete debate.
Yeah. Where do you stand on the debate over trans athletes, specifically in student sports?
In student sports.
I want to overturn the legislation that enables that. It's not fair. It's not fair for girls who've worked so hard. I mean, look, I'm wearing it here. I've got this wristband, which was given to me. I went to Clovis. It says very clearly, Save Girls Sports. A young fighter for girls sports gave me that. I spoke at the track and field championships at Clovis earlier in the year to announce my plan, which is to overturn the legislation. The governor has the right to challenge legislation and overturn legislation through the courts if the governor believes that it violates the state constitution. So we believe that legislation...
Who's we?
Me and my legal team.
Okay.
Violates the California Constitution in two specific places.
How so?
Section 28, which guarantees safe schools, and Section 31, which bans gender discrimination. Parents are very concerned about it. It comes up all the time. Look, my focus in terms of the campaign I'm running is those core everyday issues of, everything being so expensive, housing costs, gas prices, those things, the business climate. But this is a big issue, and parents raise it with me the whole time. And so I would argue, and we will argue in the courts, that actually the gender discrimination that is supposedly protected in that bill is going the other way. And that legislation now discriminates against girls who are on sports teams and have worked so hard, and they end up being denied the opportunities they worked for because of that bill. So I think we've got a good case on gender discrimination grounds, and most Californians are against that. Most Californians want that to change. Every poll shows that.
I was going to say, can you cite a poll?
Yeah, I mean, the last one I saw just within California was, I believe, 69% against that, which is a big number for California, given that this is an issue that Democrats have championed. Mm-hmm. So the Democrats are on the wrong side of California public opinion on this. I want people to live the lives they want to live. That's the whole point of my campaign, restoring the California dream. Live how you want to live, be who you want to be. That's California. We really cherish that. So do I. I want to make sure that that is protected.
But does that also apply to these transgender children?
Yes, that's exactly who I had in mind when I said that. It applies to everybody in California, but it also means that the choices of one person shouldn't impede the freedoms of another person. That's society. We have to figure this out in the kind of thick of everyday life. And I think this legislation, often legislation, by the way, is the wrong way to solve these kinds of issues. We've got to do it in a more human way. We've got to use common sense. And I think that's, in the end, how these things should be resolved. And I think this legislation has ended up creating tension and division, which shouldn't be there. And so I'd like to repeal that legislation.
So you're already coming in saying we think there are several California laws that are unconstitutional, and you're going to come in with your lawyers and try to overturn that.
I'll ask the legislature to overturn it. That'll be my first step.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say if we still have the majority, it's not going to happen. But okay, assuming they don't overturn it.
Yes.
How does that work with the state attorney general? So the attorney general is elected.
Yes.
And certainly the current attorney general has a very good relationship with the current governor.
Yes.
What do you do if you have an attorney general who doesn't agree with you? I mean, it's not an agency that you can necessarily unilaterally...
Oh, and you shouldn't. But on that, that's something I've thought about and actually learned about. Actually, the attorney general is required to file that lawsuit if the governor determines that it violates the state constitution, regardless of party.
And then... But how hard does the attorney general fight, or who do they assign to that case? Which prosecutor, right? Just because it goes to court doesn't mean it's going to... There are things that an attorney general can do to try to kill a lawsuit.
Yeah, but also there are things that the governor can do to put a spotlight on that and say, look, to the people, you elected me to get this done. There's something I'm very open about and public about. When I've elected governor, people will know that that's part of my platform. And I'll say, look, you elected me to do this. I've tasked the attorney general of doing this. He or she is slow walking it. I think that kind of public pressure can have an impact.
Transgender athlete debate. Where do you stand on the debate over trans athletes in student sports?
As a dad, as a coach, as a man, as a rational human being, boys should not be competing against girls. As a coach, I absolutely know that boys have no place in girls sports. And I'll go one step further. This is the extreme at the age level, and I'm picking high school for a reason, just because of those ages. As your governor, there will never be an 18-year-old boy walking through a 14-year-old girl's locker room naked.
My overwhelming feeling about transgender young people is the awareness that half of them try and kill themselves before they're 18. So when I think about this debate, the thing that I'm concerned about is how many desperate, vulnerable young people there are who literally try to kill themselves, who feel completely unaccepted. So I'm someone who loves sports. I played 3 sports in high school. I played varsity sports through college. I love sports. But if you ask me what is more important, then, is it who gets to be on the team or who's accepted as a human being and doesn't try and kill themselves? My heart goes out to the vulnerable people who are trying to kill themselves. And to be clear, this is not some huge epidemic. This is a right-wing attempt to victimize and villainize already vulnerable and desperate people. And my heart completely goes out to the people who are so sad, feel so rejected, so unaccepted, that half of them would try and kill themselves. That's my overriding concern here. And I believe the law is right.
Transgender athlete debate. Where do you stand on the debate over trans athletes, specifically in student sports?
Yep. So I think these are rules that can and should be set by the governing bodies. And so the case of California school sports, the California Interscholastic Federation, they should be making this decision at every level of sports competition.
In California, it's actually state law. So there's a state law that says that pupils must be permitted to participate in school programs and activities, including athletics teams or facilities, based on their gender identity, irrespective of the gender listed on their record. So it is not interscholastic here in California.
Although the Interscholastic Federation helps determine the rules under which those competitions occur. So things like the placement of athletes in first, second, third, and fourth, for example, in individual sports. So I think this policy is largely the goal of school sports. We got to ask ourselves, why do we have school sports? Mm-hmm. As a mom, why do I have my daughter play sports? Because I want her to learn teamwork. I want her to be strong and healthy. I want her to learn how to be coached and get that feedback. And so I think it's important that everybody be given that opportunity. So school sports are not about being the best or brightest. They are about learning how to play in a team. They are about building that skill to go to that next more competitive level.
Mm-hmm. And there's an argument by some saying they can't get to that next level, or they're losing scholarships if they're unfairly competing against somebody who has a natural ability that they don't.
Given the very small number of trans athletes competing in California, I have not seen any data to support that claim.
Okay. And so you are supportive of the current law?
Yes.
Where do you stand on the debate over trans athletes, specifically in student sports?
So like this is an issue where I think it is disgusting how people have decided to make this a political lightning rod to score political points. And when you look at the numbers, this is a very, in NCAA sports, it's like you can count the number of athletes on one, maybe 2 hands. Okay. Look, I'll tell you what I would tell my daughter. I have a daughter who plays soccer. I love watching her play. It's my favorite thing to do each week is to go out and watch her play. I can imagine a scenario where she ends up in a game and there's a transgender athlete, born a boy, who I could imagine that being unfair. And that would be a conversation we would have, and I can imagine it being unfair. But I also think that we are allowing ourselves to devolve into using that as a litmus test that is actually about demonizing difference, dividing people, scoring political points. And I'm just not going to be a governor who allows vulnerable people to be a punching bag. I do think that leagues have to decide and should have the freedom to come up with rules. I want to see.
So here's a distinction though in California, and we're not talking about leagues, we're talking about student sports, so school sports. So we have a state law that says that the school districts have to allow these students to play on the team for which they identify with. Now, the issue then becomes when you're looking at scholarships, right? When you're looking at competitions. There are some folks who are not using this as a political lightning rod, who are parents and who have genuine concerns, which is why we raise the issue.
And I understand that, and that's fair. And I, again, as a parent of a daughter who plays soccer, I get it. I think at higher and more competitive levels, I do think leagues should be free to set rules. I don't think there's any easy answer here, but I think the NCAA ought to be able to set a uniform set of rules and regulations on this and decide how to govern the sport. I want to see, especially at younger ages, all kids be able to play sports. I think it's good for all of our kids, or trans kids, all kids. But yeah, at higher levels, it gets more competitive as scholarships are at play, as athletes are bigger and stronger, and the outcomes are more significant. I do think eventually you've got to let leagues make that call, but I don't think there's an easy answer on that.
Governing bodies in those particular sports decide who plays in the sport. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that you are entitled to play a sport.
Well, there is in California. So
in the Constitution?
No, not in the Constitution, but there is a California law that says that it would be discrimination, that you cannot discriminate sex-segregated sports, bathrooms, or team activities. They legally are required to allow that student to play in whatever gender sport they want.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'd have to look at the way you've read the law.
I actually have it. The bill would require, this is actually from the bill. The bill would require,
this is current law.
Current law. The bill would require that a pupil be permitted to participate in sex-segregated school programs and activities, including athletic teams and competitions, and use facilities consistent with his or her gender identity, irrespective to the gender listed on the pupil's records. Now, you are the former AG.
Yep.
As a former AG and potentially future governor, where do you stand on the debate to allow transgender students to keep this law intact as is and allow transgender students to play on whatever team they'd like?
The law rules. Those are the rules. If there's a law that says you cannot discriminate against someone because of who they are, then we must protect those individuals based on the law. But there is nothing that I'm aware that says that we must, because of the Constitution, allow someone to play in a particular sport. I was going to say to you before you mentioned the law that it's the governing body for that sport that will usually set the rules.
Well, so this is specific to team sports for schools, right? Okay. So you can't discriminate.
Right. And so, for example, a club sport. Someone says, hey, I want to be able to play on that club sport. Well, what do the governing rules of that club sport say? That's what governs. So long as that club sports rules don't violate the Constitution in discriminating against somebody, and so long as we're not creating a hostile atmosphere, which is also against the law.
Well, and that I think is a concern here too, right? So this is specific to student sports. But if you take this out, then do you create a hostile environment, right? So, I mean, is it something that can be finessed or should be finessed?
Well, look, Julie, at the end of the day, it is great to be able to play sports, but you have to follow the rules of that sport. And so I think we should all agree that whatever the rules of the sport are, let you and I decide we're going to create a new sport, and we decide what the rules are going to be. Anyone who wants to play that sport in our league, they have to follow our rules. Now, if there's nothing in the Constitution that requires you and I to have to do something in particular, something special for any individual. But at the same time, I'm not interested as governor of having someone be bullied or someone discriminated because of who they are, simply for that reason. And if the rules allow an individual to play in that sport, those are the rules, and you should abide by them. If the rules don't let you play in that sport just because of who you are, then you don't get to play in that sport. And it should be that easy.
Transgender athlete debate. Where do you stand on the debate over trans athletes, specifically in student sports?
Yeah, I think I've been pretty clear on it. It's a non-issue. There are only 200 transgender athletes out of 200,000 in collegiate sports. But if you ask me, if men who have gone through puberty and are now transgender women, should they play other women? No, I don't believe they should. At the end of the day, I also will never discriminate against a transgender. I think when I was when I was mayor, it was one of the first cities to prohibit, to force transgender into the transgender inmates with men, and they were oftentimes brutalized. I will never support discrimination in any way. I believe in gender affirming care, but I don't believe those 200 athletes should be playing women.
So in this case in California, it is state law that a transgender female can play on a female team.
Right.
Would you encourage the legislature to change that, or would you do anything in your capacity as governor to change what is currently state law?
As you said, it's state law. We'll follow the law. You asked me if I agreed with it, and I don't.
This is something I'm going to say I'm still learning about. And where I've been getting a lot of my information or becoming aware of the issue more is from parents of transgender children who are in high school and college. They're playing sports. And I don't know where I would stand, to be honest. And part of why I don't know where I would stand is because for a lot of parents who are trying to help their children navigate this, and particularly getting to be adult children, there's not a lot of support to help them, really guide their children about what to do. Obviously, the parents would like to see them have full participation in the arena where their children feel that they are their authentic selves. On the other hand, there's also, just a lot of backlash that can happen. And so, how do you, as a parent, really prepare your child for all of that as well? I think there are ways that we can actually integrate transgender athletes in, whether it's like developing a separate league or, there are ways to still encourage their participation. I never want to discourage their participation in athletics, but to the extent that we're still trying to, really understand what this means for everyone, in athletics, I would say I want to learn more about what's possible, but I also don't want to have opportunities cut off for anybody.
Specifically in student sports.
Yes, I'm on record in supporting transgender athletes in their right to participate. California guarantees and protects transgender athletes in their right to participate. What I don't understand is why the Trump administration is attacking transgender athletes. When you think about it, transgender people in this country represent 1% of the total U.S. population. Why bully these students? These are young people who get attacked and bullied at their meets and at their games. And I think no matter what you think about a transgender athlete, every student deserves to be safe. I've had to go into communities alongside law enforcement to arrange safety for athletes because some adult wants to bully them. That's unacceptable. We are a state that can accept diversity, and we will make sure that we follow the law and protect the rights of transgender athletes to participate and to be able to do so safely.